It started with a letter, a plain white envelope slipped under my door on a quiet Tuesday morning. I opened it with the usual dread that comes from anything with an HOA letterhead. Inside, in a font that felt both smug and threatening, were the words, "Solar panel installation rejected. Violation of Aesthetic Uniformity Clause." Aesthetic uniformity. I looked out at my neighborhood, beige boxes lined like obedient soldiers, each indistinguishable from the next. My plan had been simple, a modest solar array on my roof to cut down energy bills and maybe save the planet while I was at it. But the HOA had other ideas. Apparently, solar panels disrupted the harmonious look of the community. I wasn't even angry, not at first, just puzzled. I'd followed the application rules, submitted renderings, even offered to paint the panels to match the roof. But the answer was no. Then came the knock. I opened the door to find Mr. Dalton, the HOA compliance officer, the kind of man who ironed his socks and probably polished his mailbox on weekends. His smile was tight, controlled, like he was fighting the urge to smirk. "Just following up," he said, "to make sure you understand the decision. It's final." "Oh, I understand," I said, staring at the clipboard in his hand like it held ancient secrets. "Thanks for stopping by." I closed the door, locked it, sat down, and that's when it hit me. If I couldn't put solar panels on the roof, why not put them somewhere else? Somewhere the HOA rules hadn't quite covered. 3. Days later, my garage smelled like solder and burnt plastic. I'd pulled out every piece of scrap tech I had, old drone parts, servos from a failed 3D printer experiment, and even the chassis of a robotic lawnmower that never really worked. I called it Project Helios. By the end of the week, the first prototype was ready. It was janky, sure. More duct tape than design, but it worked. A small solar panel mounted on a swiveling base, programmed to track the sun across the sky. It looked like a tiny sunflower, with an attitude. I wheeled it out onto the lawn. That night I got another note from the HOA. Yard ornaments must be ornamental. That was their wording, no mention of functionality, no rule against motion. Just ornamental. So the next day I made 3 more. They were sleeker, taller, more agile. I gave them names, Apollo, Icarus, and Solbot, and painted them in vibrant, garden-friendly colors. I planted plastic daisies at their bases for good measure. Mr. Dalton returned that weekend. He stood on my sidewalk staring at the machines. As they quietly whirred and tilted toward the sun like worshippers of a glowing god. "Are those robots?" he asked. "Garden sculptures," I replied, "with solar-powered mobility features. Helps them rotate for optimal ornamentation." He looked like he wanted to argue, but his clipboard offered no help. No regulation covered mobile, decorative solar entities. The war had begun. Every week I built more. I optimized the designs, made them faster, smarter. Soon they could move across the lawn, repositioning themselves based on shadows and weather forecasts. I added LED eyes, purely for show of course, and speakers that played soft ambient nature sounds. Neighbors started noticing. Kids pointed and waved at them. Someone posted a video of Solbot dancing during golden hour, and it went mildly viral. A local news station reached out for an interview, which I politely declined. The robots weren't for fame, they were for vengeance. Mr. Dalton returned with backup, a second HOA officer with an even larger clipboard. They circled the bots like suspicious cats. Apollo did a gentle pirouette, his panel gleaming. "These are excessive," Dalton said. "Excessively charming," I corrected. He handed me another letter. This one was thicker, full of citations, subclauses, addendums. They were trying to rewrite the rulebook in real time, but I was always one step ahead. By now I'd upgraded the bots with weatherproofing, multi-axis trackers, and mesh networking capabilities. If one spotted a cloud, the rest would reposition for max efficiency. My energy bill had dropped to nearly zero. My lawn looked like an art installation from the future. That's when the HOA made their move. One morning I woke to find my bots corralled. Little orange cones had been placed around each one, and zip-tied notes hung from their frames. Pending violation review. I stepped outside to find Mr. Dalton waiting, arms crossed. "You've gone too far," he said. I just smiled, holding a cup of solar-brewed coffee in one hand. "No, Dalton, I haven't gone far enough." The words hung in the air like charged particles. Dalton squinted at me, clearly unprepared for the level of defiance coming from someone in flip-flops holding a mug that read, "Sun's out, bots out." He tried to step forward, but Apollo, my firstborn, whirred ominously, not toward him, but just enough to make a statement. Its tiny solar panel tilted like a knight lowering a visor. Dalton stopped. He looked at the bot, then back at me. "I don't know what you think this is," he said, voice tight, "but you're turning this community into a circus." "No," I said calmly, "I'm turning it into a prototype for sustainable autonomy. There's a difference." He stared at me, probably calculating how many lines of bureaucratic language it would take to crush my little sun-seeking army. "Expect an emergency hearing," he muttered, stepping back across the line of cones like they were laced with landmines. "And they will be removed." I didn't respond. I just sipped my coffee and walked over to Solbot, who had somehow positioned himself to reflect sunlight directly into Dalton's eyes. Unintentional, of course. Probably. The emergency hearing was held in the clubhouse, the same sterile space they used for bingo nights and chili cook-offs. I arrived with a flash drive, a solar-powered tie, and a presentation titled Distributed Photovoltaic Kinetic Art, a Case for Functional Ornamentation in Modern Suburbia. Mr. Dalton was already there, seated beside a few HOA board members, who looked like they'd been dragged from either a golf course or a book club. He gave me a tight-lipped smile. I returned a sunnier one. "Let's begin," the HOA president sighed. Dalton stood, clicked his pen, began with slides. His entire case boiled down to aesthetics and disturbance. He used words like unsettling and hyperactive lawn pollution. At one point, he said the bots made him feel observed. I waited my turn. When I stood up, I didn't even start the PowerPoint. Instead, I pulled out a small remote and clicked it once. From the open windows, you could hear the faint coordinated whir of servos. Every board member turned as my bots rolled into view outside the clubhouse, perfect formation, single file, each tilting their solar heads toward the windows. Then they stopped in total sync and flashed a smiley face emoji on their LED panels. It was frankly beautiful. I turned back to the room. If that's not community art, I don't know what is. The hearing ended in confusion. The board voted 2-2 on whether to force the removal. One member abstained, citing personal admiration. The matter was pending further review, which in HOA language meant, "We have no idea what to do about this." Dalton was furious. I caught up with him outside as he stormed toward his golf cart. Yes, the man had a personalized HOA golf cart with a tiny flag that read, "Authority." "Phew, think this is funny," he hissed. "Not really," I said. "I think it's necessary." He jabbed a finger toward the bots, who were now slowly orbiting around each other in a synchronized solar ballet. "I'll escalate this," he warned. "This isn't over." And that's when I realized he meant it. He wasn't just an officious buzzkill. He was committed. Dalton had declared war, so I decided to declare evolution. That night, I stayed up in the garage, refining the AI routines. My bots weren't just lawn ornaments anymore. They were learning machines, pattern recognition, adaptive shading, even. Crowd-pleasing routines synced to the golden hour. I installed cameras, not for surveillance, but for visual awareness. They could now see the sun, track clouds, and communicate in a swarm network. If one went offline, another picked up the slack. I added weather alerts, emotion mimics, mostly for fun, and multicolor LEDs that pulsed in harmony. They weren't just machines. They were a movement, and the next morning, the neighborhood woke to something entirely new. At sunrise, the bots activated in perfect harmony. But this time, they didn't just rotate to face the sun. They danced. Each one emerged from my yard, gliding across the grass with the kind of coordination you'd expect from a marching band trained by AI. They spun slowly, dipping their panels like mechanical ballerinas. Apollo even did a little hop, which wasn't entirely planned, but worked. They crossed the property line, onto the sidewalk, onto the communal sidewalk. By the time I'd finished my toast, 3 neighbors had gathered outside, phones out, recording. One of the bots, Solbot, ever the showman, had started syncing his movement to a light breeze, making him look like he was riding the wind. Kidsy. On bikes, slowed down. A jogger stopped entirely. Someone applauded, and just like that, my sun-tracking robot army had gone public. The HOA emergency text alert system kicked in around 9 a.m. Everyone in the neighborhood got the same message. Unauthorized. Autonomous devices operating on HOA property. Stay clear. Await further instructions. 15 minutes later, Dalton rolled up in his golf cart like it was an armored vehicle. His face was the color of a sunburned tomato. He hopped out and marched directly toward me, practically radiating legal threats. You're violating multiple property lines. This is invasion of communal space. They're solar, I said, calm as ever. They just wanted more sunlight. Can't fault them for ambition. Call them off, he growled. Now, I would, I said, pulling out my tablet. But see, they're self-guiding. I just give them guidelines. They make the decisions. He didn't like that. Not at all. He walked right up to Solbot and waved a finger in front of its sensor array. I am officially ordering you to retreat, he barked. Solbot responded by projecting a smiley face again. Then it slowly turned 180 degrees and began heading back toward my yard, but not before playing a 5-second snippet of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. The crowd loved it. Someone actually cheered. Dalton spun toward me, fists clenched. You think this is a joke? I think it's power, I said. Clean, efficient, programmable power. He stormed off, but I knew it wasn't over. The next day, I received a notice. The HOA would be holding a closed-door emergency executive session, the kind they use for serious matters. No residents allowed, no cameras. But I wasn't worried, because while Dalton was printing out bylaws, I was upgrading Helios 2.0 lighter, faster, smarter. This version had legs. It took 2 weeks, but Helios 2.0 was a thing of beauty. A quad-legged frame, spider-like in elegance, with joints reinforced by carbon fiber I'd salvaged from a broken drone kit. The solar panel was more compact, more efficient. It adjusted itself in milliseconds to track even partial rays. But the real trick, it could climb. Helios 2.0 wasn't just an upgrade. It was a declaration, a soft-footed marvel that could scale. Fences, crawl over hedges, and perch like a mechanical gargoyle wherever the sunlight was best. I watched, mesmerized, as it clambered up the trellis beside my garage, paused halfway, rotated its sleek panel skyward, and locked in position. It looked regal, like it was claiming the high ground in an invisible war, and that's when the idea hit me. They had rules for roofs, rules for lawns, sidewalks, driveways. But I had yet to see one single clause about vertical mobility. No one had ever thought someone would make solar robots that could literally climb buildings. By the next weekend, I had 3 of them. I named them Dawncrawler, Skylatch, and Nimbus. Their movements were fluid, spider-like, but not creepy, almost graceful. They responded to a proprietary command word I coded in, ascend. And ascend they did. The next morning, Dalton arrived to pour a scene that felt like the prequel to a sci-fi movie he hadn't signed up for. One bot was hanging off the community gazebo. Another had scaled the HOA mailbox pavilion. And the third? Sitting squarely on top of the clubhouse roof, front and center, where everyone at the Sunday HOA coffee meetup could see it, tilt, rotate, and soak in the rays like a robotic gargoyle sent from the sun god himself. Dalton nearly drove into a shrub. He leapt out of his cart and marched to my driveway, where I was sipping iced tea under the passive gaze of Skylatch, who was perched on my gutter, calmly tracking the light across the sky like it had better things to do than acknowledge him. "I demand you bring them down," Dalton barked. "You'll have to be more specific," I said. "Them?" I gestured with my glass. All around the neighborhood, bots had taken to the rooftops. Some clung to chimneys. One was gently hanging from a tree branch, counterweighted like a jungle creature. Another had made itself a nest between two garden arches. "Are you kidding me?" he gasped. "They're obeying sunlight laws of motion," I said. "Basic heliotropism, totally natural behavior." He stepped back, scanning the mechanical congregation with something like fear. I saw it in his eyes the moment he realized this wasn't a rogue hobby anymore. It was an ecosystem, a new order. By now, other residents were beginning to install their own bots. I hadn't planned for that. I really hadn't. But people asked, and I shared the blueprints. I helped Old Man Jacobs build a basic sun tracker on a tricycle wheel. The Marshalls built one that played classical music while it charged. Even shy Mrs. Thompson had one that looked like a giant ladybug and gently hummed when fully powered. It was spreading, and the HOA was losing control. Then, just as I was beginning to think Dalton might give up and retire early, he surprised me. He went silent. No letters, no visits, no orange cones, not even a passive-aggressive post on the community message board. I should have known something was coming, and I found out what. The night my lights went out. It happened just after 10 p.m. A total blackout. Not a power outage. My bot's internal sensors still had juice, but the Wi-Fi was down. My control hub was unresponsive. The bot's mesh network was jammed. I checked. The fuse box. Nothing. Then I heard it. A hum. Low, distant, mechanical. I stepped outside and saw it. Parked outside my house was a brand new vehicle. Black. Unmarked. A trailer hitched to the back. Ramps extended, and standing beside it, Dalton. In tactical cargo shorts, he smiled. "Time to clean up your mess," he said, holding what looked suspiciously like a high-gain signal disruptor. I froze. My bots were offline for now. I stared at the device in Dalton's hands. It looked like something he definitely wasn't allowed to have. Sleek, military grade, bristling with antennas. A blinking red light pulsed from its side. "You're jamming them," I said, stepping off my porch. "That's illegal," Dalton shrugged. "They're unauthorized mobile electronics. Technically, I'm not jamming bots. I'm preserving signal integrity on HOA property." He said it like he'd practiced in the mirror. Behind him, the trailer hissed as the ramp lowered fully. Inside were padded slots, empty slots, waiting. I stepped forward, fists clenched. "You're not taking them." He lifted the disruptor a little. "They're not responding, are they? What do you think's going to happen next?" I felt a spike of panic crawl into my chest. My network was down, the mesh was cut, and my bots were scattered, some on roofs, some halfway up trees. Others roosted quietly like metallic birds awaiting dawn. I needed time. I needed access. But more than anything, I needed backup. I reached into my pocket and hit a button on my key fob. It was originally meant to open my garage, but I'd rewired it weeks ago for something else entirely. Emergency resync protocol. Deep inside my workshop, a dormant signal fired. It didn't rely on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. It was pure line-of-sight infrared, bouncing between mirrors I'd discreetly mounted around the neighborhood like tiny, invisible lighthouses. Outside, something stirred. Dalton moved to the trailer, starting. Toward one of the bots perched in a flower bed. Nimbus, still and dimmed like a forgotten lawn lamp. "Don't," I warned. He ignored me. He knelt, and Nimbus's LED eyes flared to life. A chirp, then a second, then movement from rooftops, from trees, from under patio furniture. They activated one by one. Helios 2.0 leapt from the trellis and landed soundlessly on the driveway, its limbs unfolding with mechanical grace. Dawncrawler slid across the lawn like a jungle cat, then crouched beside. My feet. Dalton stood backing away slowly. "Stand down!" he barked at the bots. They didn't listen. Instead, they began to circle the trailer, not threatening, not aggressive, just present. A silent, shimmering orbit of solar-powered precision. Eyes glowing. Panels raised like shields, catching the pale light of the moon. I stepped forward. "Your disruptor's range is too narrow," I said. "You cut the signal. But I built in autonomy, redundancy, failover systems. Every one of them can operate. Independently, if needed." Dalton's face was pale now. "You've militarized your lawn." "No," I said. "I've decentralized it." He stepped back again, and his foot caught the ramp. He stumbled, hit the side of the trailer with a grunt, and the disruptor slipped from his hand, clattering to the ground. Helios 2.0 scuttled forward and stopped an inch from the device. Slowly, it extended a limb and tapped it once, then looked at Dalton. I couldn't help it. I smiled. "I think that's a vote." Dalton didn't say another word. He turned, climbed into his golf cart, and drove off into the night, trailing a faint scent of panic and burnt circuits. I stood alone in the street, surrounded by my bots. The silence was warm, electric, full of possibility, and somewhere in that moment, a new idea began to form, one I hadn't dared consider until now, because if a robot could climb, could it fly?